Emilia Toledo was born to a fairly uptight family. Her parents were immigrants from Mexico, and they always told her to be on her best behavior. Emilia did not know what this meant since she was only 4 at the time, but from watching her father's careful way he spoke around police officers and how her mother presented herself to others, did Emilia soon get the message: do not look out of place or abnormal. You're merely a guest here. Still, despite having 2 Mexican parents, there wasn't a lot Emilia knew about Mexico. Apart from her mother's cooking and her father's obsession with soccer, there was not much she knew about what being a Mexican was. She didn't have any siblings and did not grow up in a neighborhood that readily accepted minorities. It is with these unfortunate circumstances that she developed a fascination with the country. She kept this goal in the back of her mind as she made her way through life. The opportunity wouldn't come until her 70th birthday, when she was retired but still offered accounting services for some clients willing to pay her price. Emilia had moved upstate and into a tiny home. Apparently, it was supposed to make a smaller footprint on the environment. She also owned 2 small pugs, Pepper and Candy. Emilia, ever since she moved out of her home state, saved up every little penny and dollar she earned. This way, she could afford not only the plane ticket, but to pay her bills and the pet sitter while she was away. Emilia, after saving up, finally decided to purchase a first-class ticket. It wasn't to feel superior or privileged, but because she heard they had better Wi-Fi. She was definitely treating the trip to Mexico as a vacation, but until she got there, she needed a way to continue working on her brand new laptop. Granted, she was still trying to figure out how to use the darn thing. Still, she wanted the best for her clients. She was a rather hard-working woman. Ever since she was 9, her mindset was set for high standards. She strove to be her best self in all matters possible. Using whatever tools she had at her disposal, Emilia studied what she did not understand, be it the English language or animals. But there was one subject that fascinated her more than anything: mathematics. Numbers, division, multiplication, fractions. It was all so complicated, and she enjoyed it. When her teachers noticed her grades improving at the next open house, her parents were praised for raising such a smart child. This small boost of pride caused her parents to turn from authoritative to authoritarian. Instead of allowing their daughter to watch TV while eating dinner, they ordered her to eat as fast as possible so that she may quickly get back to studying. Although Emilia's strict home style brought stress going into middle school and high school, she was nonetheless appreciative of her parents. After all, they were doing this for her own well-being. Her proficiency with math allowed her to take serious advanced courses in geometry and calculus. Despite her ability of quick thinking, Emilia strayed from her math classes in 9th grade. Instead, she became entranced with accounting. The concept of evaluating and categorizing numbers gives great insight into a person's life based solely on their business. Emilia got to see success and failure with every ledger, T-account, or pivot table. It's telling a story. When her parents found out, they were more or less supportive. Being an accountant is a fairly respectable job. Computers are the future, they'd say. However, they were also slightly disappointed by the news. Emilia could be an engineer as well, but instead, she chose accounting. Emilia's flight took off around 4 p.m., so she arrived at the airport a little after 12 in the afternoon. Once she got her flight ticket, she went to sit down in the designated area. She received some incredulous stares from those around her, as if they could not believe that this quaint old woman could afford such an expensive flight. Emilia knew they were glancing over at her, but she did not pay attention. She had learned how to deal with these kinds of individuals her whole life, especially in college. Emilia used to hear that to truly enjoy her time in college, she had to split her time between studying and partying. But if she had to be honest, she didn't see what good that would do. In her first year of college, she used her extra scholarship money to get the best textbooks, journals, and tools to get ahead. This way, her parents wouldn't berate her. In the first few months, she had trouble adjusting to the new curriculum and schedule. It was totally different from her public high school. There were no necessarily 8 straight-hour school days. In college, students had to balance internships, clubs, programs, and classes. Emilia worked to the bone to make sure she didn't get left behind. To make it more stressful, her college was a PWI, meaning that more than half of the student population was white. Back then, it was uncommon to see a brown woman attend college. Emilia would get stares from around the campus. But now, in this airport, it only got more aggravating. When they were called to stand in line and board the plane, she felt the stares burning into her back once again. A middle-aged man tapped her shoulder from behind. Emilia turned and asked what was wrong. "This is first class," said the man as he pointed at the plane outside the large window. Emilia responded by showing him her ticket. "I know. I bought the ticket myself." This was her very first flight on an airplane, but she was not stupid. She could read and speak both Spanish and English. However, it would be a lie if she said she did not feel nervous as she walked across a small tunnel and into the plane. It was a lot louder than she expected. Not the people, but the engines. It unsettled her. Man was never meant to fly. As Emilia crossed the aisle seats, she was stopped by a fairly young blonde woman. She somehow had 3 children accompanying her, despite how expensive the tickets were. Without permission, the woman harshly grabbed Emilia's shoulder and said, "Hello?" "Hey!" Emilia was surprised, but kept her calm. She shrugged the hand from her shoulder. "Yes? You shouldn't be here." The woman then proceeded to urge Emilia back down the aisle. "Go ask the flight attendant to help you." "Mrs.?" Emilia stepped away from the woman. "My seat is right over there." No, this is first class. Me and my children are supposed to be here? You aren't." Emilia corrected her purely out of annoyance. "It is my children and I, not me and my children." The woman furrowed her eyebrows and jerked her head back. "Excuse me? That was unnecessary. You don't say that to me, Mexican. I've known English all my life." "I'm sorry, but I'm not Mexican." Squinting her eyes, the woman gazed at her skeptically. Emilia continued, "I was born and raised in America." "You're lying. Look at you. You're all brown. Why else would you be on a flight to Mexico?" 2 of the woman's children snickered behind her. The children looked to be about 10, 13, and 16. It hurt Emilia to see what the future leaders would turn out to be, but it wasn't their fault. Emilia could have ended up like that too if she had this woman as her mother. It was all a matter of chance. Emilia chose again to ignore the woman's ignorant statements and said, "I would like to sit down now, if you will." "No, you're not. Stop making a scene and exit the plane." By this point, this entitled woman had caught the attention of the flight attendant. She approached them and asked if there was a problem. Emilia firmly stated that the woman was blocking her from getting to her seat. The woman insisted that she was in the right. Eventually, the flight attendant went to get the captain from the flight deck. This kind of behavior wasn't uncommon. It usually occurred in supermarkets or at work, especially around individuals who have never been exposed to other cultures. However, there were a few notable gems, like her ex-husband Matt. After earning her bachelor's in accounting and a minor in business management, Emilia was quickly able to find a high-paying job. For the next decade, she would jump between a few jobs until she settled on a large banking company. There, she would meet her future husband Matt Evans. He was one of several lawyers hired to help expand the company nationwide. Emilia and Matt resided in different parts of the building, but they would occasionally see each other, be it in the parking lot, lobby, or the various staff rooms. Matt was the first to initiate a conversation as they waited outside the owner's office. Emilia's parents were, to say the least, satisfied with her choice of a partner. "A lawyer, you say? How lucky," her mother would exclaim proudly. Until now, her family would tread water as they lived in the country, but now that Emilia was an accountant and she was due to marry a lawyer, they were looking forward to good times ahead. That wasn't necessarily the case, however. Emilia and the woman stood there in awkward silence. 2 of the children chose to gaze outside through their window, while the youngest looked at Emilia's clothes. The 10-year-old stared for a little while. Eventually, he said, "I like your bracelets." This compliment warmed Emilia's heart. "Thank you. They're called Ojo bracelets, supposed to protect you from harm." The child smiled and asked if he could have one. Emilia glanced over at the woman, but she didn't seem bothered by it. She was probably going to sell it as soon as they got off the plane. Nevertheless, Emilia offered him one. She gave him a bright red bracelet and tied it as much as she could around his small wrist, just enough so it wouldn't slip off. It was a surprise seeing the captain appear from the flight deck. Apart from Emilia, he was one of the only people with darkest skin. Not only that, but his complexion looked familiar. She couldn't quite place her finger on why. He had a square face resembling hers, but also eyes that didn't. The familiarity that came from the man instantly brought Emilia comfort. As the flight attendant had done before, the captain also asked if there was any problem. The woman re-explained the situation. All the while, Emilia tried her best to defend herself. Despite the woman's hysterics, or maybe because of it, the captain seemed to take Emilia's side. He told the woman that if she didn't calm down, then he would have to kick her out of the plane along with her children. This simple threat shut the woman up. She shook her head disappointedly and sat down in her seat. The captain escorted Emilia to her seat and apologized for the woman's behavior. He said that those kinds of rude people aren't that common nowadays. Once she was seated, the conversation took a turn. The captain examined Emilia before asking, "Were you born in this city?" "Yes, sir. Born and raised." "Any children?" Emilia stayed quiet for a moment, then she shook her head. She didn't feel it necessary to mention a personal struggle so blatantly. In fact, she did have a child. Decades ago, Emilia's water had broken in the middle of the night. Matt had quickly taken her to the hospital. She was in labor for 3 hours. It hurt to hear the nurses say they had to wait for her to be more dilated. At that point, Emilia just wanted to curse everybody out. Nevertheless, she stayed as polite as she could muster, and finally, she gave birth to her son, Chris. It was all well at first. Her parents were excited to see that they had a grandson. However, around a week after he was born, the doctors noticed something off about his health. They took Chris away from Emilia and into the NICU. Emilia would soon find out that her son was experiencing some kind of organ failure. For weeks, he would stay in the hospital even after Emilia had been discharged. She was persuaded by her husband and parents to stay home and recover some more. "To take it easy," Matt would say. "Focus on work and take your mind off it," her father would say. And so Emilia did. She strode headfirst into her work and put all her trust into her family, knowing that everything would turn out all right and that this sickness was just a fluke. However, Emilia, as she was getting ready to head home from work, would get the terrible news from her husband. Their son Chris had passed away. This single call would alter the trajectory of her life. Emilia suddenly quit her job and spent hours upon hours in her bed, debilitated with a depressed episode. Matt tried to cheer her up, but it was futile. A month would pass, then another, then another. It was near the end of the year when Emilia would begin to recover. She found a new passion for coin collecting. She'd go through hundreds of coins and group them by year, as if she was a druggie experiencing withdrawal. For a little while, she also got heavily into origami. Emilia was not the best at it, and the paper cuts were not something to look forward to, but it did bring her some sort of solitude. Matt, Evans, and her tried again and again, but it seemed that Chris was a true miracle since Emilia was never able to conceive again. Decades of trying to rebuild her life would lead her to a divorce. Not only that, but it managed to reconcile with her long-lost goal, to visit Mexico. And that's why she's here now. Really? It's just that you look similar to this photo. The captain reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a folded paper. What Emilia saw shocked her to her core. It was an old wedding photo, the only photo she had of herself as an adult. In it, she held a bouquet of bright, colorful flowers, with Matt holding her waist. They looked so happy. The captain continued to surprise her by saying, "Those are my parents. My biological parents, that is. The photo was given to me by the adoption center." Emilia stared up at him. Her mind took a few seconds to process what he just said, and she struggled to think of what to say. If what he's saying is true, then... "Say, what is your name, hon?" she asked. The captain laughed and held up his ID. "Well, my name is Jack. Jack Peralta." "Oh, but up till I was around 5, it was Chris." "Chris," Emilia muttered. "Chris Evans?" The captain smiled. "Yep." These days, Emilia Toledo rarely ever feels genuine happiness. She and Matt never speak anymore. Actually, Emilia didn't even know if he was alive, and her parents have both definitely since passed. Emilia organized the funeral all by herself. It was quite a hefty pay, but her parents firmly stated that they wanted the best of the best caskets, so she obliged. However, this very moment in the plane makes up for all the years she had spent in sadness. She, at first, only shook her son's hand, but after a minute, she proceeded to hug him. They stayed like that for a few minutes. So how could he be alive? Emilia vividly remembers the moment her husband said that he had passed. It replays in her mind constantly. The mere facts are rather tragic. Chris did indeed have some form of organ failure, which was caused due to undiagnosed coagulopathy, a condition where the blood's ability to clot is impaired, leading to excessive bleeding. But going against the information Emilia received, Chris did not die. He recovered. Emilia's deceased parents told a different story. They did not want to be associated with a sickly child, especially if it will cost them unnecessary expenses for treatment. Thus, they roped in Matt, her ex-husband, along with the charade and told Emilia the false, devastating news of her son's passing. Chris, or rather Jack, was given up for adoption. He spent half a decade in an adoption center before finally getting brought in by a loving couple who already had 2 children. That's when his name was changed to Jack Peralta, and if Emilia had to be brutally honest, she thinks it was for the best that he didn't stay with her. Matt wasn't that caring of a husband, and her parents? Well, they were not the best at showing emotions other than disappointment or anger. "You're doing okay now?" Emilia asked. "Oh yeah. I remember when I was 11, I got a giant scar after tripping while playing tag. I take vitamin pills now and regularly go to the doctor." Good. Emilia wanted to spend more time with her son, but she knew he had work to attend to, so she kept her mouth from talking too much, else it'll slip out. She understood the importance of hard work. The captain glanced back at the flight attendant, who was in the process of closing the plane's door. All the passengers were already in their seats, ready for the flight to take off. The only person standing was the captain. "You know," he continued, "when we land, we can spend some hours together, for I have to get back in the plane." Emilia smiled a little wider than she should have had. "Que bueno," which was Spanish for "very good." She had always felt awkward with expressing emotions, be it joy or grief. It always felt too much, too unnecessary. Jack responded solemnly, "Sorry, I don't know Spanish." "We'll fix that." Emilia and her son, now named Jack, walked down the streets of Mexico together. They took in the gorgeous scenery, as well as the local food vendors selling flautas, tacos, tortas, enchiladas, and even pepián from Guatemala. Emilia was already accustomed to these dishes, but seeing her son's reactions to the delicious food made her extremely happy. But that's when she began thinking of the photo. How did he get it? Back in a hotel, Emilia asked him that question she had on her mind. "The photo?" Jack responded. "I heard from my godmother that the photo came from a man. He didn't identify himself, but he looked to be around his 30s, maybe even older." Emilia folded her arms over her stomach in an attempt to consolidate herself. She had a feeling for who it was. Did this man have blonde hair? Oh yeah. And a striped tie? Well, my godmother did mention something about his attire. I think it was his sneakers that bothered her so much. It didn't match his suits, he said. Jack proceeded to laugh, but all Emilia felt was dread. If this is true, then she'd have to make a pretty charged phone call to a certain retirement home. Matt Evans, her ex-husband, used to joke about his chances of ending up at a facility for the elderly when he got older. "If I did," he'd say, "it would have to be a fancy one." And Emilia knew exactly the one he would choose, if he was still alive, that is. Once her son left for his own room, Emilia dialed the number for the Green Rock Assisted Living Facility. She knew the number since Emilia had constantly been told by her parents that they wanted to be moved there, but she did not have the money at the time. So every day she would memorize the number up until she had financial stability, but that day would arrive too late. Her parents passed away before it could happen. That memorization hasn't gone to waste, because now Emilia could use it to confront her ex-husband's lie. "Hold please," the operator said over the line. A minute later, Emilia heard Matt's voice. It had aged considerably, and he knew it. "Yep, this is Matt Evans. What do you want, Emilia?" "I just want to catch up." The other side went quiet for a few seconds. She thought she had lost connection, but then Matt said, "No, you didn't. You haven't called in over 40 years. Why would you suddenly call now?" "Well, what if I told you I was dying? Then this call is a waste of your time." Emilia shifted her feet in annoyance. "I guess it is quite good I'm not dying at the moment. You know who I ran into today?" "No, and frankly, I hate guessing." "Chris. Your son." "Our son." Matt went quiet for a considerable amount of time. Emilia could only guess what was going through his mind. Sadness? Shame? Disappointment? What she did not expect to hear was an apathetic, "How is he?" "He is good." Emilia bit her nails. She hadn't done it since she was 9. Great, actually, despite the abandonment. Silence passed between them. Emilia waited to hear some sort of eruption of joy or tears of happiness, but none came. Instead, he stayed quiet. Eventually, Emilia aggressively said, "Maldito imbecile. Did you know? Do you not realize how hard it was for me? Why didn't you say anything? Why?" Matt didn't hesitate to retort with, "It would have been even harder to keep that boy. He was sick, Emilia. You really wanted to carry around a sick child who could die any second?" Emilia tried to keep her voice from yelling, partly due to the fact that it hurt to do so. "My son's life should not have been devalued because of his sickness. I carried him for 9 months so I could meet and care for him. How could you take him away from me like that?" "It wasn't all me, woman. Your parents as well. They were the ones who proposed the idea to me." Emilia wiped the tears from her face. "You're lying. Stop passing the blame." A different voice could be heard faintly talking to Matt from the other side. Moments later, Matt would return to the phone. "I'm sorry, Emilia, but I don't have time for this. I wish it could have been different, I really do." He hesitated before asking, "Can I talk to him?" Emilia was about to snap her phone shut, but then she thought about it. If she kept her ex-husband away from contacting their son, then how can she act like she has the moral high ground? With an exasperated sigh, she said, "I'll give him the number for the facility, but keep in mind that I won't sugarcoat what you have done and said." "That's unfair, Emilia." "No, it really isn't." She hung up. Whatever her son decides to do with this information will be all up to him. It is his life and no one else's. Emilia was busy wiping her tears when she heard a knock at her door. It was Chris. Jack. He had heard the combative tone of her voice through the wall and had come in to check if she was okay. It was clear she wasn't. Emilia was shaken up due to being exposed to truths she had trouble understanding. Nevertheless, they existed. It stood right in the center of her hotel room. "Are you all right?" Jack asked. He had this concerned expression on his face. Emilia didn't say anything. Although he felt it unnecessary, Jack knew it was warranted. He wrapped an arm around Emilia and said, "Sorry, I couldn't be there for you. If I'd been able to walk and talk, I would have run back to you." Emilia smiled. "Of course. Thank you."